in a nutshell, Ian and I were talking about how that both of us have been favorably impacted by everything from 12 steps and the practices that went into our respective, I'll speak for myself, and I think it's mirrored in your own experience. Working through the steps with the sponsor, found a lot that was useful in that process, but I needed to adapt it to my own self for long-term practice. In other words, I spent a year working through the 12 steps and engaged with that daily with close supervision. But I needed to find something. I didn't know this at the beginning, but I needed to find something that would be sustained. Now it's 12 years later for me. It's it's like 75 years later for you, I think. It's
just out of curiosity, what have I been doing over the last month? I celebrated my 33rd year in Sabine.
Oh, that's beautiful. Wow. Total respect, Ian. That's beautiful.
Thank you. Sorry to cut you off. I just sort of
I threw out some bait there, and you gave us the more accurate. That's very impressive. So I thought around a third of the recovery, but the last dozen years, I needed to find something that worked for me. Ian was just speaking before we turned on the recorder that both of us were also favorably influenced by the work that was being done in what's called integral recovery, which is a holistic kind of body-mind approach. It was complementary to 12 Steps for sure. In fact, the two authors that have written the most here, John Dupuis and Guy Duplessis, are both very clear. I know we know them both well. I spent a lot of time in their presence, and they both have tremendous respect, and including in their writings for 12-step processes. But they bring in other perspectives too. I was very inspired by that. I was also involved in Refuge recovery, which is a mindfulness-based approach, more rooted in Buddhist principles. It also is highly complementary with 12 steps. But what I found is that over the years, and Ian, you and I have talked about this over the years, is that something evolved, and it continues to evolve, continues to be refined, that has continued to serve my success in sustained recovery. And I'm really grateful for that. What Ian and I were talking about, and then I want to hand the baton back to you, Ian, is that both of us are involved in some version of counseling individuals who are seeking recovery. I call mine here in the States, I call it recovery coaching. And virtually all of the clients that I work with are either in recovery themselves or have a loved one who is. So I'm working with couples and families, and it comes up often. First order of business is to try to help reduce catastrophic distress in people's lives, because oftentimes people are in free fall when they come to meet with me, going through job loss, divorce, financial reversals, dealing with anxiety, depression, dealing with withdrawal, even long-term withdrawal around post-acute withdrawal syndrome. So I'm dealing with that, but there's a whole other domain that I care a lot about, and it comes in very early in the work that I do, and it's beginning to bring in positive resources, many of which have been neglected or even never implemented owing to addiction. And I can speak about this firsthand because anything that I valued fell by the wayside over time in about 15 years of increasingly severe addiction. And so it's about, for me, it's about reviving that. And what I found is that with all due respect to my sponsor and 12 Steps and Integral Recovery and Refuge Recovery, I needed to find my own way, kind of my own signature. What is it that would help the most? And I found it over time just with what resonated. So the question that I'm asking myself as a clinician, as a recovery coach is, why would it be any different for my clients? Which is to say, I am happy to model for clients what it is I do around certain practices, and we'll get more specific with those over time in our conversations, Ian. But I'm always interested and always inviting, and Richard goes with every conversation. For the client, we brainstorm together what might make sense for them, what does resonate for them. And it's rarely the same thing that resonates for me because we're two individuals. And so I really love supporting clients, looking towards resources that they may have on board. I mean, I've got clients, we've talked about this earlier. I have clients that have spent their lives working on cars and lost that owing to addiction. I don't work on cars, I play music. Well, my playing music is they're working on cars, so the translation is not difficult. It's trying to find things that help to calm down their nervous system, find things that help to connect them with one another and with their higher power. It's helping them to brainstorm means for creative self-expression. All of these things are so unique and individual. So it's in the spirit that we were talking about earlier. I hope I've captured at least some of that, Ian, and I do hand the baton back to you.
Absolutely. And yeah, a lot. I started to think about a lot around one of the original concepts I was given was the whole idea of novelty, you know. And one of the processes that I noticed, or one of the things that goes on in recovery circles, if this is all it is, if this is as much as it is about not drinking, whatever, yeah, not drinking, not drugging, not engaging in whatever behavior that is, yeah, well, I might as well go back and do that because there's more excitement, yeah, in that. So how do I build, as you know, sitting down with people in recovery going, this is clients saying this is boring.
Yeah.
This is, and I remember my original therapist, you know, telling me stories about working in a particular rehab down in Sydney, about, you know, clients coming in, highly fueled life, you know, living on the edge and going, well, what's going on? This is boring. So how do we get the novelty? How do we get the excitement back into life? You know, after the nervous system's been done. If I'm building my identity around a prescription, and that's what we talked about earlier, the prescribed, you know, you know, this is your recovery process, you know, do it, regimentally do it.
Right.
You got a love of music. I got a love of martial arts.
You do, absolutely, yeah.
We're both in recovery, doing our best. Yeah. I listen to you talk to me about your forgiveness practice in the morning. I don't like swimming, so you know. And I'll never forgive you for that one, Bob.
Ian, let me jump in here. If I can do this, I'll forget it because we talked about this. Ian knows that for the last 5 years during COVID, I began to swim because the gym that I went to closed, and I began swimming. There's a community pool nearby that my wife and I go to. And it didn't start off, but within a month of my swimming, I began to realize I could use this half hour that I'm swimming, since you're underwater, I can use this beneficially in terms of recovery practices. And we'll flesh this out later, but there's three practices that are instrumental to my recovery practices, or just three, but one of them is memorizing poetry that's inspiring to me. The second one is forgiveness practice, which I learned in Refuge recovery. And the third one is gratitude practice that kind of evolved kind of in an individual way for me, and I'll talk more about that. Well, I began doing that. So for most of the last 5 years, most mornings, as Ian knows, I go swimming or have gone swimming. And most mornings, well, every morning that I'm swimming, I'm doing those three practices for a half hour. So it's been incredibly enriching. What happened is in the last few months, COVID changed, the gym reopened, and my wife and I went back and bought a second car. We made it possible for her to go swimming and for me to go back to the gym. So all these years later, I'm back to the gym. Now, here's what happened. I haven't told you this, Ian, is that I loved it because I could go to the gym, but the gym is a 20-minute drive there and back. And I still want my quiet time in the morning, which I do reading, and I write poetry and so on. So I continued with that, but then I'd get in the car and drive to the gym and back. And when I was at the gym, I got to listen to audiobooks again, which I love doing, but which has been in addition to my recovery practice for sure. The books I'm listening to are almost all psychological in orientation and meaningful to me, and that's another conversation. But it's only in the last few days that I realized what I'm missing is my memorization of poetry, my forgiveness practice, and my gratitude practice. I kept trying to cram it in the morning, but I'm already getting up at 4:45 in the morning for my quiet time, and I just couldn't bear getting up an hour earlier for this other stuff. And then it occurred to me, this is going to be obvious to you. You can see this one coming. I thought, why don't I do it while I drive, which I've never done. I've never memorized poetry while I'm driving. I've never done forgiveness practice, never done a gratitude practice. Now, beware, you might not want to be driving on the streets when I'm doing it. I'm just teasing what I've discovered. I just started in the last probably 10 days. It's fantastic. I get to do half of it on the way to the gym and half of it on the way back. It takes me a little bit longer because I am distracted by driving, but I can still do my thing. The truth is, I'm still doing the memorization of poetry here at home before I leave. I do that for about 10 minutes. But the other 20 minutes that I used to swim are divided equally between forgiveness practice and gratitude practice. Well, that's one way to the gym and one way back. So I wanted to give that as an example, again, not for somebody to copy that, but it's like how it continues to morph of necessity. And I'm so ecstatic because what's happened now is that my quiet time is almost doubled now. Because look at this, I get to listen to audiobook material, I get to practice while I'm driving, and I've got a solid hour of my own private reading and writing of poetry and so on. So I've bumped up from an hour to 2 hours with almost no sacrifice.
Beautiful. Yeah. And I think, talking to people in recovery, and it's a really good example of the creativity that I was trying to express earlier. I talk to people about their far too busy. Yeah. Life's too busy. Yeah. And there's an example of how to be creative and use the gaps to focus on recovery. Yeah. I need what I've learned in my recovery. I need to keep my head in the game. I need to keep focusing down on my recovery. So I'll say this often, to go to a 12-step meeting is for me to remember where I came from and what my purpose and vision is. Yeah. And it's basically to be the best human being I can be and to make amends to family mainly, and the living amends, and I keep focused, and then I build practices around that around the physical or the body, the spiritual and the mind, the intellectual, and work all three compartments of who I am, and develop a new, it's not even new, just to be more real, to be more authentic about who I am. Yeah.
Sounds good to me. I'll buy one.
You got it.
I look forward to
you just follow the link at the bottom of this recording.
I look forward to our investigating this further. I'm going to have to scoot in just a minute, as you know. And I felt like we've just scratched the surface, but I love how you set us off on a path here of creativity and customizing our recovery to suit who we are. Your martial arts is my music, for example, is somebody else's auto mechanics. And the fact is that we need these expressions of body, mind, and soul. We need those in our lives, and it will be very individual how that goes. I can't imagine, I'll say this and then I'll wind down for myself. I can't imagine sustaining recovery over a lifetime without the practices that we'll be talking about. And I'm very clear about that with my clients. But beyond that, there's virtually no prescription about what form that takes.
Yeah. It's individualized and creative. Yeah. I just want to make one mention because I'm aware of the backdrop I've set myself up with today. And as I was saying to you, Bob, my usual computer basically shit itself. The hard drive went, and that's the best I can do with my vocabulary. And I'm on a desktop in my home office, and that's the backdrop. So, yeah. Yeah,
I like it. I like that.
I'm just conscious of that. Yeah.
I like that it's real life, that we were able to improvise, even our decision to do this. I'm glad that we did this, and I'm glad we did it with your home office as your backdrop. That's keeping it real, it feels like to me. So we're on to something. Ian, I wish you well. I'm going to plan to see you in a couple of weeks, and certainly I'm going to my 50-year high school reunion in between now and the next time we meet, and I'm sure that there'll be interesting conversations to share.
Yeah.
I'll be talking with two of my very, very long-term friends, one of whom I haven't seen for 40 years. And I know that we'll be talking about my recovery, and I'll bring back any nuggets or tidbits, morsels from that visit up north, okay?
Beautiful.
All right. Take good care. It's really good to see you, Ian. Yeah.
Safe travel, and we'll
be back in a fortnight.
See you soon. Yeah.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.